the Akeidah Verb series that's in the hallway there. Can you talk about that a little? And also what's the deal with the use of the verbs as a structure, and how did that translate into visual things?
I guess, okay, so first of all, truth in advertising, not every painting is actually a verb. It started out trying to be, in fact, every verb, or every verb that I thought like was an operative verb, an important verb that would move the narrative forward. And as it went on, it got a little bit looser, and it got either a verb and or concept that I wanted to focus on. Choosing verbs was my way to be able to focus closely to the narrative, to really to get inside of it. I guess by doing that, it forced me to look at the text in almost under a microscope. And then also, a verb, okay, how do I visualize that, right? And so when I encounter the thing, and Abraham takes his son and places him on the altar. Well, I had to visualize, how do you place an adult on an altar? Most of those things. I mean, sometimes I slipped up, but you're an artist, and you just try to. You also to some degree go with the flow.
So, a question, not to interrupt, but
No,
because it's part
please.
of this. When you say you screwed up, what does that mean exactly? You went for a more pictorial approach in that painting that just illuminated the story rather than it's not the verb anymore. And you know what I mean? Was it a punctuation thing to kind of like visually show it, almost like a comic strip or something? Or
okay, yes. Basically, what I did was the first 20. Okay, the painting started in the year 2010, and I first had 20, and it basically was from the beginning of the narrative. With the except that I added the Hagar scene at first, right? But then after he then substitutes the ram and slaughters the ram. Good. And burns the ram. That's it. Good. So I thought that was the end of the story, right? And so what I did was I printed out a line or two where I thought there was a verb on a piece of paper, a piece of paper, and did a drawing under it. So comic strip like, yeah, boom, 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 quite exactly like that. And then, maybe 5 years later, did the same thing with the last 10, which was from the time where it says, and God sent a second angel to Abraham. What's all this about? Because that was like, I couldn't make sense of the end of that piece. Why? And it's all about, it's like metaphors, and and because you haven't withheld your son, your descendants going to be as numerous as this and that. What is all this stuff? And so I felt like I've got to confront this. After all, if it's such an important text. But again, I did. I printed out one or two lines where there was a verb or two, or quote a scene that I could grab onto, like sand. Right? Or what else did I have here? So there was, right, okay. Angel of the Lord called the second time. So that's the second time. Multiply your seed stars. That's one painting. As the sand on the seashore, another painting. So literally, this is from the text, right? Blessed seed, your seed shall be blessed. Oh, that's another idea. Is it a verb? No, but that was the fudging meaning. It's not a verb per se, but it's an idea, right? Abraham returned to a young man. Ooh, wait a minute. Again, returned. Okay, that's a verb. Good. So we'll do a painting of that. Now that's the end, and then that ends with that. And Abraham lived at Beersheba. Good. And I just had him returning. So, but then now it goes on, because it goes on to a genealogy, right? Rebecca. Good. So then there's Rebecca, but now I'm going past the literal thing, and then the next parsha, right? The death and Sarah lived, right? So Sarah died in Kiryat Arba. One painting. He came to weep for her. Another verb. Weep for her. Now, but I'm pushing past, because I want to get to the end, as it were, of the whole narrative. What happened to Isaac? Isaac is comforted. We have a whole story going on. Eliezer, he goes and gets a bride, a whole thing about right. But what's the core of it? What's the verb of it? Isaac is comforted, because after all, he's kind of the subject of this whole thing, right? From the patriarchal point of view, we've got to get Isaac moving forward into the future. He's comforted by what? by Rebecca, marrying Rebecca and going into where? His mother's tent. Bingo, another painting, and then finally my end. Again, we're out. Well, it's a couple of lines after that, right? Abraham returns to this woman, Keturah. Who's Keturah? It's Hagar. So that's where I'm fudging, meaning it's not verbs per se, but it's concepts that are bigger than a big narrative. They're really the ones where I want to go, because I want to end with Hagar, because I maintain that Hagar is very important. So that's where it went. And then I did kind of weird things, especially the last 10, because they were more recent. And I was floundering. I didn't know quite what to do. What am I going to do with sand? I'm going to, okay, the sand. Well, sand. And there's a whole thing about if Isaac's descendants don't do what he's told by God, you'll be trod upon like the sand of the seashore. Oh, so sand's not such a good thing necessarily. What does that mean? And for some reason, Caravaggio's Narcissus, this man kneeling down, absorbed in his own reflection. That's something, it just reverberated with me. And they also like the idea, the notion of all your seed, and your seed shall all the nations, and your seed shall be blessed with all the seeds of all the nations of the earth, because you obeyed my voice. So I couldn't think of how that would play out in an image. But somehow, again, I'm not sure how this works. But again, Caravaggio's St. Francis of Assisi, because St. Francis in that painting, it's actually out here, is leaning back. The angel is holding him up. So that seems like a blessing. And and so if I can grab onto the power of a Caravaggio for that image, maybe I'll get somewhere with this and try to get at it. So the process ended up actually getting more complex as the ideas got more abstract, such as blessing. How do you show blessing? I mean, I'm going to show somebody like this. I don't know.